afternoon, Tobago. Good afternoon to Tobagonians abroad. Good afternoon to the national community by extension, and certainly the global citizen that is paying attention to what's happening in Tobago. This is our final press briefing for this week. But as you are aware, we have been regularly updating you on what's happening here in Tobago in terms of the cleanup operations and the efforts. I have with me this afternoon Director Stewart. I will have Director Stewart bring you some operational updates, in particular the conversations that are happening regionally, of which he is our representative. And subsequently, I will address you on a few issues, and then we will take the questions that you will have. So, Director Stewart at this time.
A very good evening to all. It's my pleasure to be here once again to keep you and also the wider public up to date with what is happening based on our response plan going forward. As you may well be aware, the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan speaks to 3 tiers. And as a result of the latest development based on trajectory of the spill, or the movement of, or should I say the movement of the hydrocarbons on the surface of the water, it is now engaging, based on information received yesterday, the attention of SEDIMA in a very specific manner. Ladies and gentlemen, this borders, according to the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan that speaks to the notes. I know the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries important plays the custodian. They are the custodian of the plan, the permanent secretary, and also other major players. But as our part in the plan, I always reflect on the Tier 1 operation. And this would have exceeded us just within mere hours of this event. And by the time we started speaking like this to you, the media, it was a Tier 2, which required the national input in a very strong way. And this we have seen taking place and being very positive going forward with the type of response that we were able to coordinate going forward. I started by pointing out to you that the territorial waters of Grenada, based on the fact shooting, ground shooting, and all others surveillance that has been done, confirm that it entered into their territorial waters, and by that, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency hosted a meeting just a few hours ago. At this meeting, they were able to ask of us, through the ODPM and myself, our situation, trying to establish what you call a needs list, identify challenges, and also utilizing other regional partners to look at the probabilities of our event impacting their territory. So I can report, based on what was said at the meeting, that they have activated their plan to cope with what is that may probably come their way. Based on those projections, there is a probability. I will not give the level of that probability now. I will leave that for the other technical people to do, but that they may be missed. But definitely the southern part of it, if it's going to impact, certainly it will be the southern tip of Grenada, which, as you know, St. George's, that is the southern part of the island. We were able to share information as to our experiences. We also promised that through the right channel, our situation report number 5 will be shared through the ODPM, and also by the necessary means, they will be able to use some of that information to even guide them further. That being said, I just want to get back on landing here in Tobago. We continue to see improvements in terms of our response. Those gully booms or those gully suckers, so to speak, correction, those gully suckers are all on the island. The tankers and the tank farm is in place, and therefore the transfer of those previous suction that we would have done over the past 72 hours, we are now seeing that we are able to have effective storage, and those suckers are now paying attention to critical areas of the 15 kilometer zone. And if I to give an example, for example, along the Rocky Bay area, there are about 3 or 4 areas that were of very concerning, using my friend on TikTok, very concerning to us. And therefore, we have successfully taken care of the one behind my back, which is the port of Scarborough, this entire strip, as far down as the Coast Guard base. The latter part is reaching our attention, the heritage staff who is working on the cleanup along the shoreline, along with the other players who are doing what they can do at sea. Now, going forward, I indicated that we had to close some roads. 2 areas were shut off as a result of, during high tides, those pockets of hydrocarbon were finding its way onto our roadways, and therefore those roads had to be closed. There was also a concern about the air quality. The IMA is on the ground, and we are treating with those issues along with the EMA. So very later on, it is expected that we will receive a report that will determine whether or not the air quality is at a stage whereby schools can be reopened. So you can expect definitely as we go into the weekend, that information based on the findings will be made available to all. The marine life, we recognize the importance of the wildlife, and not just what you may observe in the day, but also the nocturnal creatures. A clinic center has been set up utilizing one of our shelters, and those folks from that angle are taking the necessary steps to ensure that our marine life and also the wildlife is being taken care of. I will want to pause here now for if there is any concerns, we'll be able to answer some of those questions going forward. Chief?
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. Just some additional bits of information. Mr. Stewart pointed out, reminded all of the areas that we have closed and the reason for doing so. In one area in particular, the area by Cemetery Street, you'll observe that there's scaffolding in use, and that is to allow us to get into those crevices, those nooks and crannies that we can't get to readily. The effort is being concentrated in the area of Lambo all the way down to T.H.A in getting that area completely cleaned. Today we had training for volunteers that happened this morning, and a second one will happen later on this afternoon. We also had intake of around 40 additional hands to be able to help us move the material from that Lambo to T.H.A area much faster than we were, because we're concerned that that area was lagging behind a little. He pointed out that we have storage on island, so you may have observed one of the frac tanks down at Lambo by the fishing depot. That looks like one of those containers, shipping containers. That's essentially a frac tank, and those are being employed around the island to really store the waste material. We have mobilized and we have set up for an activation all the way down in the back of Canopy as well, where the skimmers are being used to extract from the water. So we do have a frac tank down in the back there, and I must say special thanks to the workers out at the Division of Infrastructure, because we could not get the frac tanks down in the back there, The trailer truck could not go down in the back there, and they worked night and day to be able to lay some material on the roadway there to make it drivable for the trailer carrying the frac tank all the way down to the back. So we need to thank the Division of Infrastructure for their efforts and their contributions in that regard. I will now open for questions. And I'm sure the things I have not addressed, you will ask them in questions anyway. So let's take the questions and I address them from there.
Good afternoon, Chief Secretary. We heard in Parliament earlier this afternoon that the Prime Minister denied withholding any information from you in regards to identifying the vessel and that sort of thing. Can we have your response on that?
Well, if you notice at my last press conference, I did not state specifically who I think were withholding information. But I made it quite clear, and I'll repeat myself. Because you see, sometimes people hear information and they create their own headlines that does not always line up with what was said. So let me be lucidly clear. The press release from the Ministry of National Security leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions. As to who is responsible for those unanswered questions, I cannot say, nor did I venture to say. Those unanswered questions remain unanswered at this point, such as, number one, who is the owner of the vessel that ran aground in Tobago and is leaking oil? If we are aware that a vessel went missing from sometime the 4th of January, I believe the press release said, then certainly somebody had to have reported that it was missing. So who is the owner of that vessel? Question two, where are the schematics for the vessel? The schematics really and truly are the drawings, the outline of this vessel that can tell us shape, size, compartments, so we know what we are working with. We have divers going down in extremely dangerous conditions, and therefore knowing what the schematics are can allow us to make educated guesses about whether or not there are compartments on that vessel storing this fuel-like substance that has not yet started to leak. Question three that I have asked, beyond the schematics and beyond the owner of the vessel, the question is, if a vessel went missing from the 4th, I believe is the date, how is it between that time and the 7th of February when we were called about the leak? How between that time period, we had no sort of theorizing, no sort of effort to consider whether or not that which went missing, that fell off of our radar? Because we appreciate that if a vessel sinks, that it will fall off our radar. How between that time no one communicated with us and said, look, this happened and it might just be this vessel? Because then that would have also given us an early educated guess. So I asked those questions, which I am duty bound to ask on behalf of Tobagonians. My duty is to protect Tobago's interests in all of this, and I have a responsibility to ask those questions. I hope the central government aren't offended by those questions, but I like to operate with transparency, and I will ask and continue to ask those questions until I get an answer.
Has there been any direct communication between the Ministry of National Security and the T.H.A. since this matter was released to the public?
The Tobago House of Assembly has had direct communication with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries and also the Ministry of Works. That's why you saw those two line ministers here on Friday. As a matter of fact, I reached out to those two line ministers on Thursday. Let me walk you back. So on Wednesday, 7:20 a.m., we got the report. We did an initial press briefing about the matter Wednesday afternoon around 3:30 in the afternoon from out of Shore Park. And we shared all the data we had at that time. By Thursday, I returned and elevated the matter to tier 2. And I explained that once the disaster is elevated to tier 2, it means that it now requires a national response. By that time on Thursday, we already had Ministry of Energy indicating to us that they were sending experts to Tobago, which we accepted with open hands. So essentially, from get-go, we have been working with the central government diligently on this matter. On Wednesday, even before the experts came from Trinidad, T.H.A had conversations and meetings with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries from the moment. So they have always been part of the conversations. They are part of every single briefing that we have because we open the doors for them to be here. The Ministry of Energy brought on board Heritage, and Heritage brought on board their contractors. We have opened the door to all of them. Kaizen was first in the space because Kaizen is on contract with Woodside, and Woodside had some equipment in Tobago, and they were authorized by Woodside to then use the equipment in the space. I'm taking my time to go over all of this again so people can see clearly a couple things. That one, from as early as possible, we made contact with our central government. As a matter of fact, I took it upon myself. I didn't even bother to write a letter, to send an email, to send a written letter. I called, and when I didn't get on phone, I sent WhatsApp, and then they both returned the calls, and they both gave the assurance that they will work with us. That was Thursday. So from the get-go, we have been working together on the issue. But I am saying quite clearly that I will continue to ask those questions until such time as I get answers. The Prime Minister answered one of the questions. I did mention to you that I found it oddly coincidental that someone can WhatsApp me some information 24 hours earlier, and then some of that turned out to be true 24 hours later in an official press release. And so I felt it duty-bound to ask some open-ended questions, which I did. My understanding is that the Prime Minister answered one of those questions, which is to say that it is patently ridiculous for, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, for any suggestion to be made that the owners of the vessel are interested in purchasing our refinery from us. So that question is answered quite strongly, and it's answered in the negative. So we accept that answer, Mr. Prime Minister. We have other questions that we have asked. The question of who is the owner of this vessel, or owners, that's still on the table. And we should know, if we are identifying it as the same vessel that went lost, somebody had to have called that in with Coast Guard. So why we can't say who owns the vessel? Why can't we provide the schematics? Why? Because if we know who the owners are, and let me give you an important element of it. If we know who the owners are, then they can just come clean with us. They could just tell us, look, we had X amount of this fuel there. It was this type of fuel that we were carrying. We were heading in this direction. Right now, we're still guessing those things. We are still estimating the amount in terms of barrels of that fuel-like substance that went. We don't know for sure, but the owners can tell us how much they were carrying. We are still awaiting final lab results. IMA came and took fresh samples today, as I pointed out. All they're telling us now is that it's a fuel-like substance. The owners could tell us clearly what they were carrying. So let's just answer the questions. And I'm not suggesting that it is the Ministry of National Security that's doing the cover-up. I mean, I shudder to think that they wouldn't know. But it is my job to ask the questions.
And finally, where are we in trying to stop the leak at this point in time?
We are in an excellent place with trying to stop the leak. Well, not stop the leak, but contain the leak. Right? As I pointed out, we brought divers from Maritime Division. That's Maritime Division out of the Ministry of Works. They came up, and when they came up, they dive with a view of seeing if we can plug the leak. And their report is that it is too dangerous and it's not feasible to plug the leak. So what we have done is containment by way of primary and secondary booms, around the wreckage site, trapping all of the fuel-like substance in one place, putting the skimmers in the water and extracting it there. But it continues to flow even as we speak, notwithstanding it being contained in a very localized kind of way, in a very specific zone and area. It continues to leak into that zone, in our control zone. Again, we will really love to know who owns the vessel, because then they can provide us with information and we could stop some of the guesswork.
Chief Secretary Curtis Williams from Reuters. Just want to ask you a couple of things that seem to be a little bit at variance with what the Prime Minister is saying. His suggestion was that you sought to impugn the reputation of anybody who's doing business with Petrotrin or Petrotrin, and therefore he thought it was irresponsible of an office holder to seek to do it in the way in which you did when you suggested it was somebody trying to do business. Would you say, in retrospect, that perhaps that wasn't the best approach, or do you stand by your approach and your statement about that?
My approach, and I stand by asking the questions. I am for transparency. I'm really not concerned about who is vexed and who is annoyed. My job is to ask those questions on behalf of the people of Tobago.
The thing is that you talked about the 7th and the 8th and so on. Wednesday, you talked about Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday was the 7th, Thursday being the 8th. There was a letter from the permanent secretary, which was read out in the parliament, suggesting that it was on the 7th that she contacted, in fact at 2 p.m. there was a meeting, including the gentleman next to you, Mr. Stewart, was in that meeting on the 7th, which is the Wednesday, and help was offered, or the ministry's help was offered, and was told that in fact T.H.A would handle it, and if they needed help from the ministry, they would contact it. So is it that the PS letter is inaccurate and therefore the records of the parliament wrong, or is it that there's an issue about recollection here? And the last thing is, if in fact T.H.A said to the ministry, if we need your help, and that help came 24 hours later, that request came 24 hours later, that in itself might have been an error.
I can't speak to that meeting, because I think that letter is supposing that they spoke with the director Stewart. So I'll ask him to answer that part in terms of what was communicated to the Ministry of Energy. But I know for a fact on Thursday evening, I spoke with the Minister of Energy. I know for a fact on Thursday evening we had confirmation that we will get folks from the Ministry of Energy to Tobago. Sometime on Thursday, I got the contact number for both, I think, the Deputy PS and one of the experts in the Ministry of Energy. And I tried to make contact with them, did not get through to them. So they missed my call to them. As a matter of fact, I was willing to breach the protocol, because the usual protocol is that public servants speak with public servants and the ministerial colleagues speak with the elected officials here. I tried calling them myself and did not get them on Thursday. But Mr. Stewart could speak to what was communicated on Thursday with on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I wasn't part of any meeting with Ministry of Energy on Wednesday. So he could say what was communicated with them on Wednesday. But I know on Thursday, after being able to see what was on the ground on Thursday, I reached out forthwith. And I don't know necessarily that the T.H.A is saying explicitly that the response was necessarily poor. As a matter of fact, that question came up very early. Ms. Jackson asked that question in one of the first press conferences we had, probably on Thursday. And I pointed out to Ms. Jackson then the timeline, and I pointed out to Ms. Jackson then that having to have most of the expertise and equipment coming from Trinidad, there is a natural lapse in time because of logistics. You're talking about getting ferry sailings in the middle of the carnival period with cruise ships, which altered the sailing of the slow boat, as we call it, or the cargo ferry. We spoke about the fact that we have to work with Caribbean Airlines to get people on flights that they did not have to get to Tobago. All of that. So I explained that to the Tobago public. So I don't think anybody from our end was saying, look, the central government was late in coming to the draw. My my point has been that there remains too many unanswered questions, and those questions should be answered. And I've been firm on stating that. But I'll have Mr. Stewart bring clarity if you require some clarity in terms of what happened in that meeting on Wednesday the 7th between himself and Ministry of Energy.
Thank you very much, Chief. So there seems to be a conundrum situation where information is concerned. And while I will not use this media or this medium to do a back and forth, what I could give you is the assurance of what I knew transpired on my end, in the sense that being myself being very disciplined to both the Tobago oil spill contingency plan and also the national oil spill contingency plan, we would have communicated that the Tier 1 was in effect very early o'clock that same day. I know there was communication with who is Mr. Mark Rudder. I had some conversation with him, and he did pledge to me that his support is available. I'm not sure if you all recall that in the first 24 hours, we thought we were dealing with what is called a search and rescue operation. But one of the things that I am very pleased about based on our development here in T.H.A is the ability to do our information management platform. So those actions are recorded, and therefore we will go back to the records when I say our data entries and see exactly the dates and the time. I could even probably go back to my phone, but I can't do that here now. But so I think there may have been an interpretation, a bad interpretation, but we have definitely, I remember the ODPM would have reached out to me and asked what's the situation. I would have told them what is the situation and that we have activated the Tier 1 plan. And within 24 hours, within 24 hours, we were able to signal to the national community that we into a Tier 2. Now, if anyone who have access to the plan and is acquainted with what Tier 2 means, it means that the national resources is being called upon. In other words, what we are saying is that this exceeds the capacity of the Tobago House of Assembly. And as an area controller, you have a responsibility to communicate that according to the plan. Both the Tobago oil spill contingency plan, it states that. And if you look at the notes in that section that speaks about the tier within the plan itself, which is the national contingency plan, it tells you the same thing, explaining what a Tier 2 means. Today, as I came to the microphone, I went on to talk about what is happening at Sidima. It means that we are bordered, we are into a Tier 3 based on response capability and where we are going. These are indications, it's written, and I often tell people, if you don't want to act according to the plan, then don't put it in a document, because the document sometimes can come back and find you very fishy. But I'm very much acquainted with these documents. I spent most of my disaster life either being part of the consultation or helping with the information that is going into it. So off my head, I know what 1, 2, and 3 tier means. And therefore, we will fix that information going forward. I think there may have just been a bit of a conundrum, so to speak, with how the information went by. But it's recorded, and we could always go back to the records.
I just have two more questions. No. For you, Chief Secretary. Venezuela's Minister of Energy has said, this is Reuters reporting, that they are prepared to help Trinidad and Tobago, and secondly, that they've done many flypasts and none of that oil has gotten into Venezuelan territorial waters. Now that we are close to Tier 3, can we expect both Venezuela and Brazil to be assisting in this matter, because the Prime Minister talked about Brazil? And the second and I think most important thing is when can we expect, the people of Tobago at least, expect some relief from this present situation? In other words, either the stopping of the leakage, the lifting and the end to the constant fuel that is coming out of this vessel. What's the kind of time frame you have in your mind?
Right, so as relates to your first question, the we are guided by the oil trajectory maps. A guide has been of assistance in that they have done some reconnaissance for us up to yesterday in terms of determining where this thing is. The last map released from T.H.A did not show any in Venezuelan's territory, but showed in Grenada's territory, marine territory that is, marine space rather. We will be willing to accept help from anyone in ensuring that this thing is properly resolved. I told you that the Ministry of Energy brought some international experts from OSRL yesterday. I told you about their presence on island, and their recommendation is that we need to work on that which is now leaving Tobago waters and that might impact on other territories. So that in itself will force us as neighbors to work together at some point to treat with this matter. Yesterday when we got the latest trajectory mapping, even before I came to you, the media, I reached out to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and I sent him all the information that we had up to that point. And I told him that based on his judgment and Cabinet's judgment, if there is a need for government-to-government conversations, then he should proceed. And here is the information as we have it up to that point. So I sent that to him yesterday and he did acknowledge receipt of same. In terms of when this will stop, it goes back to one of the questions I asked. We just don't know the volume of what we are dealing with in the vessel. And that's one of the reasons why knowing who owns the vessel is important in this equation. Because this thing continues to come out of the vessel. We don't know how much is inside there, how much more is left to come out, or if there is much more in there than that's already out. We are currently operating as if it is at maximum capacity, thereabout, but we really don't know. And so that's why our best and safest bet at this point is to do the containment, meaning literally draw a sort of circle around the wreckage site, contain all of the spill in that circle, and extract as it comes out. But that could take us some days again, or it might be some hours again. And that's because we just don't know. We just don't know. And it is too dangerous to dive to be able to investigate the schematics of the ship ourselves. So we really need to know who owns the vessel so that we can have that conversation about the schematics.
Mr. Chief Secretary, Liz Williams from TV6, just wanted to know any update on the samples?
Right, so as I indicated, the samples that we sent down, they came back saying that it's fuel-like substance. And they returned today and they took samples from inside the vessel itself. In other words, they wanted a sample with far less contaminants in it, because the samples they got were from all of the landing sites and from in the pool in the ocean around the vessel. So they came to take a sample almost as pure as they can find it to run that test for us. And so by early next week, I will be able to say definitively, beyond fuel-like substance, what it is. Let me also say, while the next question is coming, that and this is information shared before, we have in the space Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Works, through Maritime Division, and the Pilots Association. We have IMA, which is under Ministry of Planning, that's Minister Beckers. We have AMA, also from under Minister Beckers. By the way, I did have a conversation with Minister Beckers also about this issue. So that's another minister I spoke with about this. And all of this is before the Prime Minister visits and so on. We were having those conversations. We have in the room Tiger Tank, Ambipa, Kaizen, and Heritage. Also in the room, we have divers led by Alvin Douglas. We have ATFA, the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association also in the room. So when we meet, we have Coast Guard as well. And you know, I've been batting for Coast Guard these days and telling you how efficient and hardworking Coast Guard has been in the response to this matter. Right? We have to give them credit where the credit is due. So essentially every single day, the varying teams go out, do their duties, and late in the evening, we were doing 2 briefings per day. We're now doing 1 per day. And we're doing the briefing at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, everyone comes in. They come with their deliverables. They show what they were unable to achieve during that day. And then we work out what the solutions are, how to tackle it the next day, what times they're leaving port, what times we're setting up what, all of those things. And we get it done the next day. That's how we have been operating. And it's that sort of very strict management style that has led to this area being cleaned quickly. And of course, we have our partners that are experienced in this. So we have some worthy partners in Heritage, for example, that have been quite critical in the cleanup operations here. So I need to also put that in the room. So I don't want anybody to go on thinking that the T.H.A. has or is refusing to work with outsiders. As a matter of fact, I pointed out since Thursday to you that I was reaching out to them, and within 24 hours, I came and I declared it as Tier 2. I didn't even leave it up to Mr. Stewart. I declared it as Tier 2, and I explained that meant that national resources and a national response must be mounted. So while TIMA is coordinating, we have several players here from the Trinidad space who are part of the cleanup operations. So no, I am not walking back my questions. I will continue to ask them until I get answers. 2, those questions are worthwhile questions to be asked. 3, I didn't point fingers at anybody specifically, but if you feel guilty, squeal if you can, that's up to you. And 4, I continue to ensure that we get this island cleaned and that we protect the industries that are at risk.
Chief Secretary, just at the same time this whole situation is happening, we have another situation in Mount St. George with a barge that's taking on water, and that's been happening over the last several days. Can you give us an update? Are you monitoring that situation?
Yes, it's been monitored. TIMA and Director Stewart, they have been there, and they had conversation with them. Up to today, they were visited. So that situation is being monitored.
Of the resources that they asked for, I was able to share with them so far.
And all the resources that they have asked for to help with the removal, we have provided for them. And anything else they need that we can provide, we will provide to ensure that they are able to safely remove that barge. But the truth is the one of larger concern, and that has a much serious impact on the environment is the oil spill. Well, the fuel-like substance being spilled into our environment. But yes, we are giving them support. We'll give them all that they ask for, that we have, that we can give. And we try to communicate and touch base with them daily.
And finally, we had a situation at Signal Hill Secondary Comprehensive School. Do you have any thoughts on that incident there?
I only learned of that on my way here. I don't have the details. And in circumstances like that, I would prefer the Division of Education take the lead. As a matter of fact, I believe the Secretary is already preparing a response or is responding on the matter, because she should have greater details in terms of what has transpired there. So I wouldn't hazard a response without first having the players at education, including the school supervisor 3 and so on, give that response based on the facts from the school.
Well, the Education Secretary, she did respond to the media and she sent out something, so we did receive that. What I wanted to get a response from you with is, last night there was a murder in Tobago. There has been an increase in gun crimes on the island. What do you want to say with respect to this?
Well, a couple of things. One, when the murder took place last night, yesterday evening, I was actually right here. right across the road where we have our operations center at the moment, and we were preparing for our final briefing for the day. When that took place, I believe sometime after 6 or some minutes to 7 yesterday evening. With regards to the matter of gun-related violence on the island, it is a matter I plan to address in the House next week, Thursday, and it should come up as a substantive element for debate in the House. So, and at that juncture, I will want to share what we are doing, what we plan to do, and also what we will hope that the national security apparatus will do insofar as the fight against the matter. I can say, though, that I did in fact uh, write to the Prime Minister as the head of National Security Council on the matter. I wrote to him early in January in a letter dated the 12th of January 2024, and I received his response today. I got his response today. It came across my desk today, and in that letter to him that was dated the 12th of January 2024, I requested a meeting to discuss the elevated murders and gun violence in Tobago. And in his response, he said further, and I quote, "Further, I wish to assure you that as Prime Minister and in my capacity as Chairman of the National Security Council, I continue to be apprised of all matters concerning crime in Trinidad and Tobago," close quote. So I did not get an answer, yea or nay, about a meeting, except that he simply said that he continues to be apprised of all matters concerning crime in Trinidad and Tobago, end of quote. So you will get some more information when we get to the House next week, Thursday.
Just one last question here. I'm seeing that Venezuela's Minister T.H.A also said, and I'm quoting, that the vessel has nothing to do with PDVSA nor Venezuela.
Well, many people are saying, it's not whether I buy it or not. No, let me be clear. I am not the expert in these matters. I am the expert in charge of Tobago matters. So therefore, where I come in is where Tobago's interests is being impeded or is being threatened in one way or the other. And it's from that place I need to ask those critical questions. So Venezuela is saying the vessel had nothing to do with them. I believe Jack Dio made a statement saying the vessel had nothing to do with them. And all that we get is this vessel went off radar. It got into trouble sometime around the 4th of February. And somehow it showed up on our shores, and that's all we know. Meanwhile, the global community continues to ask these questions. I've seen a report on Bellingcat.com that seemed to suggest what the vessel is, but in terms of ownership, that is still a mysterious question, and I don't know why that remains a mysterious question. But it is my job to ask the question. Those who know the answers can decide to answer or not to answer, and the people of Tobago, the people of the world that are looking on, will make a judgment call based on that.
You can also investigate the oil type, because you know Venezuela is very heavy oil as opposed to. So you can also do that, he said, but it has nothing to do with them.
So, of course, you can investigate the oil type, and one of the reasons for taking a sample from directly in the vessel is so that you can do fingerprinting of the material, and you could basically determine where the source, where it emanated from. So that can be done. So yes, that is in fact correct. Right, I want to thank you all. We continue the operations. Stay tuned if there is to be another briefing. It might be sometime on Sunday or Monday, but just stay tuned and we will make you very much aware of what is happening. Because on our end, we are about being very transparent when it comes to this incident. Thank you very much.